everyone, it's Njeri. Welcome back to Onyx Pages. It has been a very long time since I have filmed a book review, and I'm going to do 4 very quick book reviews of books that I've read in May, June, and part of July of 2018. So I'm happy to talk to you about them. So the first book that I'm going to talk about, they're on a little stack right beside me. The first book is The Book of the Phoenix by Nnedi Okorafor. And of course, like, the cover art is super amazing, and I really enjoyed this book. So I've made these little post-it notes so that I have something to refer to when I talk to you about these books. Okay, and I got this from, I don't know if you are subscribed to the book supplier, but I really love their videos, and their reviews are like 5-minute post-it note reviews, and I don't know, they've given me some significant goals on how to do this in a really brief way. But The Book of the Phoenix. So I describe this book as a coming-of-age sci-fi novel where we follow Phoenix, who is an African woman who grew up in this scientific facility run by an organization called the Big Eye. And we learn as the plot unfolds that she is a bit of a genetic experiment, a nefarious genetic experiment. And I don't want to... That's the dryer, because why not? And we learn more about her, and we learn more about the context of her creation as the book goes on. So I don't want to give too much away from the plot, but I can tell you that it's a really fast-paced, beautiful story of a young woman who comes into her own power and has to reckon with how she got that power and how she wants to use it. So, using the 7 cowrie shell system, I gave this, The Book of Phoenix, 1 cowrie shell for plot, because I felt that the plot was, it was moving, it was engaging, I never got bored while I was reading it. There were many elements of the plot that surprised me. There were moments of laughter and joy and fear and grief, and I felt that the climax was really satisfying, and that the end of the story, even though it was a little bit confusing for me, actually, it was still satisfying. And having now read Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor, I feel as though there are, and also the two out of 3 books of the Binti trilogy, I feel like she plants references to parts of her story in different books. So there are a few references here that got me thinking about Lagoon and Who Fears Death, and so I don't know if they're actual connections that she's made or just things that I picked up, but I really enjoyed it. It was a quick and satisfying read. In terms of the characters, I also gave 1 cowrie shell for the characters. My favorite character is Phoenix, because I love being taken along the journey of someone who is realizing that they are more than they knew, and someone who doesn't know very much about their past, but is sort of putting it together and finding meaning of it, and then marshaling the power that they have out of that knowledge. And Phoenix along the way meets a whole bunch of people who give her bits and pieces about her past and about her identity, and while that's happening, she's also learning and experimenting with new things that are happening to her body and to her mind. And interestingly, in this one, Phoenix is younger psychologically than she is physically, and so that creates a nuanced illustration of coming into one's own, coming into one's power. There is also another character that I call the Winged Man, and he may actually have a name, but I've forgotten his name, but he's sort of this beautiful shadow figure that shows up at different parts in the story, and I really enjoyed him because he was mysterious, but he was also a bit of a guide, and had humor that reminds me of like the uncles and the dad in the men in my life. So 1 for characters. I've given one cowrie shell for world building, because the book takes us from the US to the Caribbean to the continent of Africa, and as somebody who's born in Canada, parents from Trinidad, African ancestry, I really enjoyed looking at the interplay between people in all those places. And also there are depictions of transnational solidarity as Phoenix and her crew get on this quest that I won't give you more details about, but I enjoyed that. This book is really it felt to me to be very purely science fiction, so there's a lot of science, there's a lot of chemistry and biology and genetic tinkering that I really enjoyed. I gave a cowrie shell for challenging norms, because as in many of Okorafor's books, the girl wins, and I've learned recently that is very much by design. In this book, we've got Phoenix who conquers. She conquers a number of different things, including her own sense of who she is, and at this point, unfortunately, I feel like stories where you've got a strong young female protagonist who wins those stories are still rare. In terms of LGBT content, I don't recall, mind you, I read this in May or June, but I don't recall any LGBT narratives, and if there were any, they didn't really stand out to me or were developed in the plot, so I didn't give a cowrie shell for LGBT content. One full cowrie shell for this being Afrofuturist, for all the reasons I've already described, especially in terms of the plot, and one cowrie shell for being aspirational, because I think one of the problems with traditional science fiction is that there's only one way to win, right? You have to slay the dragon or conquer Voldemort or find the ring, and throw it into a big fiery mountain. There's always just sort of one way to win. And here in the Book of Phoenix, there are lots of different triumphs that happen throughout the plot. And there's this subplot about rewriting a book, right? Because the Book of Phoenix is actually a book that figures in the story. And as somebody who used to be Catholic, there are interesting references to holy books and how they're written and whose perspectives they represent and how they morph and change over time depending on which communities are interpreting those books. So this was 6 out of 7 cowries for the Book of Phoenix. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that you do too. The next set of books is actually a pair. The first is A Taste of Honey, and this is by Ashante Wilson, and that is the gorgeous cover. So you might recall that in past videos I've referred to both of the books by Ashante Wilson as books that I've been thirsty for a while, because they feature gay characters, gay black characters. And I'm just going to read the plot. So for A Taste of Honey, I gave one half cowrie shell for plot, and it was because I found the plot confusing to follow. Now, I haven't read much of Wilson's work, so it could just be because I was getting used to the writing. But I'm just going to read the paragraph in the back. Long after the towers left the world for the stars, but before the dragons came to Deluca, the emperor sent his delegation of gods and diplomats to Great Olarum. As the royalty negotiates over trade routes and public services, the divinity seeks arcane assistance among the local godlings. Akib bin Siddiqui, fourth cousin to the royal family and son of the master of beasts, has more mortal and pressing concerns. His heart has been captured for the first time by a handsome Delucan soldier named Lucrio. In defiance of saintly canon, gossiping servants, and the furious disapproval of his father and brother, Akib finds himself swept up in a whirlwind romance. But neither Akib nor Lucrio know whether their love can survive all the hardships the world has to throw at them. So, for me, I really took this book up as a love story. I found and I'll get to this when I talk about the world building, but in terms of the plot, I was really moved by the romance here, and so that's what I mostly responded to, and I would give half a cowrie shell for plot because I found some of it a bit confusing. For characters, I gave one cowrie shell. because I thought that the perspective that the book was written by, which was mostly Akib's perspective, I found it really compelling. I love Akib as a character. He is this like strong, effeminate young man who's just, again, kind of coming into his sexuality and in love with this male soldier, and there's flirtation and there's joy and there's sensuality and sexuality, and it's really beautiful. And because he's not like this hardback, fully developed man, you get to walk around with him as he tries to figure out how to flirt and how to express his love in all of these awkward and really beautiful ways. So I loved Akib as a character, and also the soldier. There's a scene where his soldier man defends him against a family member, and it's just so it's like the gay Afrofuturist version to like the knight coming and saving the damsel, but it was just 10 times billion times better than that, and I loved it. It was good. So for world building, I gave half a cowrie shell for that. The world building was intricate and really, really layered and really nuanced, which I found wonderful, but this is a really short book, and I feel like we needed a little bit more space in order to examine the political, the magical, the spiritual landscape that Akib and his soldier man were living in. So there just wasn't enough to hook me in and fully satisfy me that this world was fully formed. Challenging norms, I gave 1 cowrie shell for challenging norms, mostly because Akib is this really strong, effeminate man, and I feel like strong and effeminate and young and powerful and autonomous, that those words tend not to go together. At least this is the first time that I've seen effeminate, gay, black man as a very strong and powerful and strategic protagonist. So I really enjoyed that. I gave 1 cowrie shell for Afrofuturist, because I found that even just having these, I'm looking at the cover, and one of the things that I'm noticing is that this story feels to me as though it took place in the past. The language that Wilson writes in is really, really beautiful. It's unlike anything that I've read before, actually. It actually reminded me of Shakespeare, and from time to time there'd be like urban hip-hop vernacular thrown in there, so the writing was really beautiful. But just putting that language and putting these bodies and putting magic and politics into this world together is an Afrofuturist project. Definitely 1 cowrie shell for LGBT, because obviously it's a gay African love story. And to that point, what I really liked about this one is that Wilson really took time to explore what it means to be on the DL, and how these men found a way to love each other in a world that literally would physically harm them if they found out that they were together. And a half cowrie shell for aspirational, and I feel like I would have liked to see a little bit more here toward the end. It didn't really finish for me. I really liked the fact that there was this hope for the two of them, and hope beyond the grave, hope beyond separation, hope beyond the existing political landscape. So I liked that, but I wanted more. It was just too short. So that's a taste of honey, and I think that I'm at 5.5 out of 7 cowrie shells for this one. So another book in the series is The Sorcerer of the Wildeeps. This is also written by Ashante Wilson, and I liked this one better. And I think a number of you, when I went through my June haul, you said that you'd read both of them, and you were curious about how I would find the books related to each other. So I preferred The Sorcerer of the Wildeeps, and I think I preferred The Sorcerer of the Wildeeps in part because it's a bit longer as a story, and also the the plot was a little bit easier for me to follow. I'd already become familiar with the world because I read A Taste of Honey. So I was able to kind of slip into, like sort of drop into the world a little bit easier. So this one actually I scored a little bit higher. So for plot, I gave 1 cowrie shell for Sorcerer of the Wildeeps. And I'll just read the back. Since leaving his homeland, the earthbound demigod Domain has been labeled a sorcerer. With his ancestors' artifacts in hand, the sorcerer follows the captain, a beautiful man with song for a voice and hair that drinks the sunlight. The two of them are the descendants of the gods who abandoned the earth for heaven, and they will need all the gifts those divine ancestors left to them to keep their caravan brothers alive. The one safe road between the northern oasis and the southern kingdom is stalked by a necromantic terror. Domain may have to master his wild powers and trade humanity for godhood if he is to keep his brothers and his beloved captain alive. And that's exactly what happened, and it was amazing. This story you definitely felt like you were on the road from one place to another, traveling with this caravan of unruly, inappropriate, loving men of different shapes and sizes and sexual orientations and desires, and you're just with this crew as they move from north to south and everything that happens to them along the way. So I love the wildness of the plot. I love the chaotic atmosphere that Wilson takes us into. There's one, for me, the most gripping part of the plot is when the caravan ends up in the Wildeeps, and the Wildeeps is this multi-dimensional forest with mythical creatures that you can sometimes seek, sometimes not. You need magic in order to survive it, and it was amazing. I also gave 1 full cowrie shell for world building because of that. I did find that still it was a little confusing to follow the plot and to follow the world, but I still absolutely loved it. The characters, my favorite characters were the sorcerer and the captain, because they're in love and they had to keep it under wraps, and that was kind of cool to see how they did that. And there are tons of men. I think there were maybe 1 or 2 female characters, and they weren't even like secondary characters, but there's a lot of testosterone in this, a lot of men, a lot of cis men. And so I just don't read a lot of books like that, but it was still really interesting for me. Challenging norms, I gave half a cowrie shell for that. I think the plot itself was a norm challenger for similar reasons of A Taste of Honey. I gave 1 cowrie shell for LGBT content, because obviously we're dealing with a gay male love story. 1 full cowrie shell for Afrofuturist for the same reasons that I scored 1 for A Taste of Honey, and 1 for Aspirational, because there was a sense of there's a world beyond death, there's a world beyond the human realm, and in The Sorcerer of the Wildeeps, that realm was explained a little bit better and a little bit more than in A Taste of Honey. So altogether, this one got 6.5 out of 7 for cowrie shells. So I think that if you're going to read these, if you're only going to read one, rethink your options. Just read both. But if you really can only read one, I would recommend that you read The Sorcerer of the Wildeeps. But if you're going to read both of them, I would read A Taste of Honey before The Sorcerer of the Wildeeps. Worked really well. And then the last book is, I don't even really want to review this, but it's Octavia Butler's The Parable of the Sower. I actually listened to this on audiobooks. It's my second or third read of the book. And so, sirens, because why not? So in this book, we follow Lauren Olamina. Lauren Olamina starts out as a 15-year-old young girl first living in a community called Acorn, which is a gated community that was created by her father, who is a pastor. And it's basically like what used to be a middle-class neighborhood, but now is this gated community that has to defend itself against the outside world, because this is a futuristic U.S. where the rich are super rich, the poor are super poor. Not like we don't see that now, but things are going wild. resources are really scarce. The government can't be trusted. The police work for a fee, and so everybody's really just trying to hole up in their communities and survive. Unfortunately, Acorn as a community doesn't survive, and most of the plot, therefore, is us following Lauren Olamina as she walks from what used to be Acorn to somewhere else. And while she's in Acorn, and as she walks, she develops these principles, this religion, this set of values that she calls Earthseed. And she's got this journal where she writes down all of these beliefs that she has about how the world should be and how we should live and what God is and isn't. And one of the things I loved about this was that I'd forgotten that Lauren was so young as a character. When I remembered the book prior to reading it again, I was picturing her as a 30-year-old, but she was a teenager when she had these ideas together. So there's this hopefulness that comes with her character that I really, really appreciated. So it feels kind of sinful to rate a book by Octavia Butler because she is the all, but I did, so let's go. So for plot, I gave one carry for plot. I just described the plot, and it was gripping and wonderful and left me wanting more. I gave one carry shell for characters. Lauren Olamina and the people in her community that she meets along the way are all really well fleshed out, and I feel like the people that she travels with are kind of like a microcosm of the world around us. You know, you've got your people who are believers, people who don't really know what's going on, but they're in it for the ride, people who are hopeful, people who are doubtful, and then you've got, violent folks that are motivated by values that don't support community. One full calorie shell for world building. I love this world that I love, but I was really uncomfortable by the world that Octavia Butler has created in this story. And as I read it now, I feel like the world that we're living in is a lot closer to what she has written than I felt the first time that I read this, maybe 10 years ago. One full carry for challenging norms, and I say that just specifically because, again, almost like in Book of the Phoenix, we've got this teenager who is this black female teenager who is giving us an alternative. Through her voice, we see a world, we see survival in a way that's super compelling. I don't recall any LGBT content or LGBT characters. I could be wrong, but I gave 0 for that. And 1 calorie shell for Afrofuturist because it absolutely, obviously is. This is a project of Octavia Butler offering alternatives, and her work gets criticized for being negative and sort of dire, and I just found this book to be full of hope and aspiration, which is why I also gave 1 for Afrofuturism and 1 for aspirational. So altogether we've got 7 calorie shells. Sorry, I lied. 6 calorie shells for Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. And I know 2 things that I want to tell you. So number 1, there is a musical that's going around the US. I don't know if it's playing anywhere right now, but it's based off of the Parable of the Sower. And I saw one very brief clip of the music, and it was just beautiful. And also I've heard that there is going to be a graphic novel version of the Parable of the Sower put together by the same folks who did the graphic novel version of Kindred by Octavia Butler. So those are the 4 books that I wanted to review for you. I hope that this review was interesting. I hope that you are inspired to pick up some of these or all of these and read them. And if you have, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But for now, I will sign off, and thank you very much for watching and supporting Onyx Pages. I look forward to seeing you in my next video. If you like this video, please like it. If you're not subscribed, just think about just subscribing, because that would be really cool. Okay, see you later.